Approval of the minutes of February 11th.
Second.
Ann and Bruce, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, director's report.
Thank you, Chairman, board members. Thank you. We have new staff that we would like to introduce. Financial analyst Patricia Sykes, Patty Sykes just joined us last Monday, so we're excited. Next update is the MTP Metropolitan Transportation Plan update. Things are moving along. We have a consulting firm providing us technical reports. We also had a project selection process that's occurring. We have draft document that'll be available, many parts, technical appendices and technical reports in March for your review and TAC committee as well. Public engagement is scheduled March and May, and things are moving along as scheduled with much coordination from local jurisdictions as well as KDOT on KDOT projects as well. So that's on MTP. Next slide, please. I just want to introduce some funding categories in the TIP document because today the agenda is a little light. So when the upcoming action items are occurring, wanted to provide some context on some of these project selection process and funding in general. Most of you are aware of WAMPO Suballocated Funds. That's about approximately $12 million per year. This is an example from 2017-2020 TIP. So you can see circled amount is something most of local jurisdictions are familiar with. WAMPO staff closely work with local jurisdictions in this selection of the projects. So I wanted to, show that the 4-year average for this time frame, 2017-2020, is $50 million. So annual $12 million. On the other side, the non-suballocated funds for the WAMPO region, I also want to bring to your notice about $83 million that occurs. That's while the project selection process on $12 million is done with WAMPO staff and local jurisdictions, the $83 million is that project selection occurs with KDOT, with local councils and the project selection process. And the other day, Mike Moriarty was mentioning how the modeling and forecasting all take place in their teams. So that takes project selection process from the KDOT. And again, that coordination takes place with us, WAMPO board and this committee as well. So something that put into perspective how things go. So just want to introduce those funding categories in the next slide. We have some funding categories also. So you can see this $12 million is at the bottom of the slide that has the funding categories are MPOs, STP, the Statewide Transportation Planning Funds, CMAQ funds, and Transportation Alternative Funds. So, and then on the top half of the slide, you can see the categories are NHPP, like National Highway Programming Funds. Those were federal funds as well. So just want to introduce those two funding categories. While, both of these projects, most of the NHPP funds take place, like North Junction is a good example, interchange projects and bridge projects. Those were some of the examples how these funds are allocated. So thank you. Next slide on that. Also, this one is introducing the funding categories. You can see NHPP stands for National Highway Performance Program. And then STP is Surface Transportation Block Grant Program. So STP actually is federal funding program that is divided into two parts. On the right side, you will see MPO STP. And then on the left side, like the bottom, you can see KDOT STP, that KDOT Surface Transportation Block Grant Program. So again, STP funds are federal funds that are divvied up between WAMPO suballocated funds and then WAMPO non-suballocated funds. So the NHPP program is a major chunk of the non-suballocated funds that is allocated to interchange projects, bridge projects, resurface, interstate, those types of projects. So just want to introduce these funding categories. In the next slide, I would like to summarize this. Now, on the next slide, we have this 12 million annual average. So if you look at the four-year average for the TIP projects, it's about 50 million. And if you see on the left side, that's the non-suballocated projects that KDOT manages prioritization and allocation. So if you combine both 335 and 50, that's four-year allocation that occurred between 2017 and 2020. This is one example of how it occurred in the past 4 years. So if you look at 335 plus 50 million, if we approximate it to, let's say, 400 million because of the inflation and all for the future, and if we multiply that four-year example with the future 5 years, forecasting up, this is an approximate planning level. Now we get, if we multiply by 5 years, this 400 million times 5 is about 2 billion. Just want to summarize that how our transportation plan, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan that we are developing, the magnitude of the total projects that we are programming. So just want to give the high-level summary. These are rounding numbers. Now it could be plus or minus 2 billion worth of projects. Again, I just wanted to show how this group, this body manages, through the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, how this leadership manages and coordinates with not only with Department of Transportation, KDOT, with also the local jurisdictions. It's all, there's so many things that take place in the coordination, but just wanted to provide the high-level summary of the funding categories, mainly on the federal side, not on the local side. So just wanted to touch base on this. I believe that this helps us context, providing, for example, Chris has a presentation today on Metropolitan Transportation Funding Menu Projects List. So in his presentation, today, where does this fit in this context is what I would like to clarify that fits in the suballocated funding projects, like WAMPO suballocated funding projects. Because next meeting at the TAC and the TPB, we are going to talk about KDOT projects that Mike Moriarty is leading and his team is prioritizing. So I wanted to provide this so that as we progress into action items, where does these projects list fit in, that clarity as the time progresses. Thank you.
Allocated fund is?
Those were WAMPO managed funding program, suballocated funds.
Where does that money come from?
Still federal. It's a CPG. It's federal dollars. That is combined of MPO, STP funds, CMAC funds, and transportation alternative funds. It's all federal funds. So therefore, you want to add anything, Mike, to that?
I was going to say that it's federal funds marked to be spent in this region, is how I would characterize it. Be programmed and spent in this region.
Why do they call it sub-allocated?
It's a federal term.
And it just
Sorry,
so
Rick.
happens. What timing to be at this meeting to be able to explain suballocation. Oh, I'll be leaving now. Funding formulas, there's, I think, population and all sorts of wonderful indices that kind of go into this, so, but given the fact that WAMPO is the largest MPO in the state, you get a healthy share of the funding, so. But yes, as Chad talked about and Mike, STPG grant, NHPP, TAP money, CMAQ, there's a formula that kind of brings it down. But it's pretty much a set amount, so there's some confidence that the MPO would know, based on that suballocation, what they can anticipate. It helps them to program and have a better sense of what types of funding they can bring to you all as you program your needs out.
Yeah, that's a good question. The term suballocated funds, this evolved over many years with that WAMPO. So it was, even before me, that term was there. So I just used it as I was learning through it. So that's all on that, because we're going to take several action items in the next projects list. So I want to provide a context where these come in. Tip update. So the tip is on schedule. Staff is coordinating with local jurisdictions. At the next TAC meeting, we'll be progressing with our project selection process. That's all. I have the APB, no, this is in your package, so this is informational.
Okay, any other questions for Chad? If not, we'll move on to the consent agenda, WAMPO 457 plan amendment. Have a motion to it. Okay, Bruce and Ann. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Public comment, anybody from the public wish to address? Okay, perfect. New business, action, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. Chris.
Thank you. So here today to talk about our project list for the MTP. I covered this as an update item last month, so I will try and be very brief with this, but did want to just go through it quickly before we ask you for action on this. So the MTP has to have a list of all the major or federally funded transportation projects in our region in it. Everything that'll happen from 2020 out to 2040 through the end of the plan. And in our case, the project list really comes from three separate sources. First off, we are grandfathering in and just rolling over everything that's in the current TIP. So everything you hear Kristen coming up and talk to you about every couple of months when we do amendments, all of that just goes directly into the new list. No need for any sort of project selection or additional scrutiny. So if you have a project, you can keep your project. Second source is our WAMPO funding menu projects. These are the projects that we have done a project selection process for over the course of the past 6 months or so. I'll be talking about those in a minute. And finally, we'll have the state and locally funded projects. And I'll be talking about those in a second too. So on the WAMPO funding menu, you may remember that last summer we did a call for projects. We got applications from a great number of WAMPO jurisdictions. Staff did some screening on those. We had a project selection committee that included Troy Tabor, Donna Klassen, and Ann Stevens from this body. Also Jim Weber, James Wagner, and Dan Squires from the TAC. And they heard from all the project sponsors. They rated the projects on our selection criteria and came up with a recommended list of projects. And that has gone into this big list of all the projects on the MTP project list. Not going to go through all of those 40-odd projects for you one by one, but just to give you the high-level overview here, you can see a little over 3/4 of the projects are road and bridge projects. Those are those two big pie slices. The largest slice is what we're calling modernization projects. These are projects like taking a 2-lane rural road with open ditches on either side and going to a 3-lane road with curb and gutter. So changing the type of road that we're looking at. Next biggest slice there, what we're calling rehabilitation projects, are projects where the bridge or the pavement is either in bad condition or it is trending that way and we need to go in and do some rehabilitation on it, either rip it up and repave or do some fixes on this bridge. A lot of those projects also include modernization elements, just sort of on the basis of if you're going in there and tearing stuff up anyway, we can also make it work a little better. But the motivation for those is really fixing the deteriorating pavement or bridge structures. Next pie slice there, about $9.5 million, is our dedicated bike ped projects. These are things like a bikeway going down to Hayesville or the Redbud Trail, mostly stuff that's on a separate alignment, not adjacent to a road. I should note that there's also a lot of bike ped infrastructure in those road projects. So in the modernization and the rehabilitation category, we're doing things like adding a multi-use path along the side of a road as we rebuild it, but those don't get broken out separately. We have a small slice for transit, some steadies, and some vehicles for the Sedgwick County Department on Aging's paratransit service. There's a slice there for technology, mostly going to some KDOT ITS projects, expanding their which-way system, but also some going to the city and some to KDOT that will put ITS down on arterial roads, on surface streets. You may remember WAMPO funded a project a couple of years ago, putting in some technology infrastructure along K-15. We're looking to expand that to other corridors. And finally, that last little slice up there at the top is planning projects, which warms my heart as a planner to see those included on the list. In terms of who's getting this money, we've got a pretty even split between the city of Wichita and all of our other jurisdictions. There's a slice there going to KDOT. I should note that is all these technology type projects. KDOT does not generally ask WAMPO for funding for more traditional road and bridge type capital projects. And finally, WAMPO gets a small slice, and again, that's some of those planning projects. So that's the very brief coverage of the WAMPO funded projects on the list. We're also required to list all regionally significant projects regardless of funding source. So even if WAMPO doesn't directly have anything to do with these projects, we need to have them in our MTP. For the locally funded projects, what we've mostly done is drawn from the city and the county CIPs. So Kristen had the lovely task of reading through every WAMPO jurisdiction's capital investment plan, which I'm sure was very fascinating. And we've also worked with staff members at all of our jurisdictions to make sure we're doing a good job representing these projects in the MTP. Finally, state-funded projects, and this is where there has been a change from our last meeting when I gave you this as an update item. We have a list of KDOT's major capital projects. They are not included in the current list, the one that you'll be adopting today, because we only got them after last month's TAC meeting. We wanted to run them by the TAC before bringing them to you for your approval. So don't have those big KDOT capital projects on here. There are a couple of smaller ones. We'll be bringing that to you as a separate action item at next month's meeting after TAC has had a chance to take a peek at that and make a recommendation for you. So that is my very brief summary of our action item. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, no questions?
All right, we are asking for your stamp of approval on this so we can move forward with the process of adopting the MTP and getting our next 2021 to 2024 TIP all locked in. So would welcome some action.
Make a motion to approve.
Got a motion by Tom. Second by Ann. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
And appreciate the work that our committee has done on that. They put a lot of time and effort. And we thank you a lot for that. Okay, moving on, committee and partnership status. The executive committee, we're going to meet next week on the 17th. One of the things that we have to look is Chad's coming up on his 6 months with the organization and review his performance, and then we'll bring that back to you next month. Also, since we have new personnel in the accounting, we've talked to AGH. They think there's possibly a need to have some more input on things that were identified in the audit from 18, and some of the things will be, they anticipate being looked at in the 19 budget. So once we get that a little more firmed up, and we'll take that to the exec board and then bring it back to you next month for possible action on that. And anything else, sir? Nope, that's it. Troy, TAC.
Sure.
Hello, everybody. First off, I want to thank you all for giving me the responsibility, I guess, to head the TAC team. It's humbling, and really I'm in there with a bunch of giants, some very, very big experts on all that they're doing, and they're taking care of your communities very well, and it's pretty amazing to listen to them and to be in that room with them. A couple of things that I just wanted to highlight, because you can read all of this in the notes. One is we had a gentleman here who also showed up at the TAC, Alan Kyler, talking about Bike Walk Wichita. And we had a brief discussion about maybe a way that we can show that for all the projects that aren't specifically called out as bike ped projects, that we could figure out maybe a percentage of the other projects that include it, so that we can show that we're doing quite a bit more in as far as bike ped than what we're actually showing. It's very important. It's big trend everywhere, and we're not really getting credit for what we're actually doing. And it wouldn't be that difficult to add that, and they're working on it now to make sure that we understand it as a whole, as well as the communities that rely on us to make sure we're doing what they need. The last thing was really, we just talked briefly about the TAC committee as a whole, and what it's for, how it's used, why it's here. It's really, it wasn't the term technical, I'll still call it technical advisory committee, to do a lot of heavy lifting, so that when we get to this point and we go to vote, we know that everything's buttoned up and presented in a way to us that it makes it easy for us to understand what's going on in WAMPO and in our region. So that's really all I got today.
Thank you. Any questions for Troy? If not, Tom, Tom Hine.
Thank you. Wellspring is nearly here, and you know what that means for KDOT, right? Lots of projects, and that's what we'll be seeing gearing up in the next month. Not to say that we didn't have 4 projects going on over the winter, but we're going to add to the mass confusion by initiating some smaller projects. 135, we'll have a couple projects, and we haven't even really finished the one that we repaired the long bridge on southbound 135. That'll continue through the spring, but now we're going to start the northbound side too. Gosh, we've got a couple of bridge projects on I-235 down the southwest corner of town. And we will just see more and more come along. The Green Project is progressing nicely on the north end of I-235, and planning and design work is continuing on the gold phase of the North Junction project, and that will start soon after the Green Project finishes. So lots of things going now, and things, the wheels are in motion for even more, which we see as a good thing.
Thank you. Mike?
All right, so today was Transit Day at the Capitol. It was very well attended. Hats off to my staff helping orchestrate that in cooperation with KPTA, which is the Kansas Public Transit Association. In terms of forward, our next program, the legislation is moving forward, as you might expect. It's moved through many of the committees at the State House, and we're hoping and expecting and hoping again for floor votes in the next couple weeks. So we'll keep our fingers crossed with that.
Richard?
That's okay. Well, it's great to be back, since I think my last meeting was in December. Quite a lot's been happening, so have a few updates. So first off, I'll start with some personnel changes within our office. We have a new team leader coming on to work on the engineering side. Richard Jury's coming from our Oklahoma office, and for those that had worked with Rusty Simmerall, who had been with our office a long time, Rusty became the Deputy Director of Federal Highways in Nebraska back in September. So we've been having infill persons, and so Richard will be joining us next week. For those that have worked with Doug Doherty, our engineer down here, he retired at the end of December. We've advertised for that vacancy and are soon to be doing interviews. So So getting into funding, when I was here in December, we had a continuing resolution. Congress came through with funding for the rest of the year. So overall for Kansas, we are bringing in $416 million. This is really cracking up a lot. $416 million. And as Chad talked about, the suballocated funding, so we're in good shape for this fiscal year. The FAST Act expires, our 6-year piece of legislation, on September 30th. Folks are wondering, do we have a bill? No. There has been work in the Senate, and we have something called an election, so we're expecting probably going into CR, continuing resolutions again after October 1st is when our fiscal year begins. So just stay tuned. There's going to be a lot of movement happening on all of that. In April at the Kansas Transportation Engineering Conference, which will be April 14th, I believe, my executive director, Tom Everett, will be the keynote speaker. He will be here, and our deputy administrator is probably coming out that week as well to visit Kansas City, Mala Parker, and she was confirmed in October just before I came. Strategic Highway Safety Plan. I know that you folks are working with KDOT on occasion with that, with the Executive Safety Committee. There's been a lot of work going on towards their update. We had peer exchange last June with Missouri DOT, Kansas DOT at the offices of Mark. KDOT's gone and visited. We had to put together some travel for KDOT staff. They just got back from Nevada. They've also visited Washington State, but the end game is for the SHSP to have more of an outcomes-driven document that will have initiatives. So WAMPO safety activities, that will be something they can tie into. So just letting you know, the plan for that is to have that updated and by the end of June. Asset management plan, we accepted the final plan in the fall, and there will be a consistency update happening this year. I know that WAMPO's been working on their version. Manual uniform traffic control devices, there is an update at the national level that's going to be happening, so there will be an announcement in the Federal Register. So just giving you advance heads up, that's a big initiative. I would see probably a lot of updates, especially on traffic management, innovative types of signing, that type of thing. A big announcement was on February 24th in the Notice of Federal Register. There was an announcement for $1 billion of build grants solicitation, and that will close on May 18th. The focus of that solicitation is local entities. And of the amounts to be awarded, 50% of that will be for rural areas. So Kansas is well positioned to compete for that. A big focus of that's going to be infrastructure of all types, not just roads, but transit, rail, intermodal facilities. Per grant, $25 million will be the cap, and per state will be $100 million. But definitely would encourage you all to take a look at that. And I know that KDOT is working with the locals to talk about how they can work with them in terms of setting up some parameters and procedures as to how, if a locality wishes to apply, how that would look and how they would work together. So that's happening. On the innovation side, we've been working with WAMPO and other entities to have a Kansas Transportation Innovation Summit to showcase EDC technologies, everyday accounts, and other innovations happening within Kansas. We're looking to have that in Wichita in the June timeframe. I know Chad's kind of bowing his head because he's involved in that as well, but we're really looking forward to having that happen, and it'll be in your backyard. So details are being worked out, but that'd be a great opportunity for locals to come and kind of see what innovations are happening in the state, ideas they can take, especially a big focus on low cost alternatives. So that's all I have to report. But anyway, any questions?
Okay, thank you. Under other business, Chad has something here he wants to bring up.
Thank you, Chairman. Speaking of innovation and new technology, you all know Wichita State University is working with WAMPO on technological evolution and perceptions. They started working on inviting public participation and what perceptions occur with this implementation. Our Tri-Tabor had been great help in kicking off this event with a media event at the City of Wichita. So it starts, and the survey started, and it went out to many of our local jurisdictions. You may have received this email as well. So, this survey is seeking input from various entities and public in terms of preferences and in terms of perceptions of this evolution. Thank you.
Do you mind if I add so everyone here, it's important that you get with your constituents, with the people in your city or county, and make them aware of this survey and have as many as possible fill it out, because it's really going to give us the only insight really I think we can get of how everyone is thinking the current and future of technology and transportation in our region and our cities and Wichita and how we connect, and get an idea or a sense for what they think. And hopefully we'll use that to figure out how we would move forward, as cities or as WAMPO in the future. So read this, ask everyone to take the survey.
Thank you, gentlemen. Anybody else have anything? If not, we stand adjourned. Thank you.